Hello and welcome to this presentation on the State of Customer Experience 2022. On behalf of the team at Twimbit, we are very thrilled to present to you some of our learnings into the best practices, the innovation opportunities, and what some of the best companies in Asia are doing to advance customer experience. Now, in order for us to do this report, we collaborated with the practitioners of CX. So a big thank you to the many practitioners, Pranay, Tatuk Munira, Rinu Rajesh, Rohan Khanna, David Rizzo, and Rohit, as well as Adi Meritz, who spent considerable time telling us about what they are seeing in the market and guided us to several perspectives that help shape this report. To begin with, let's start with the most important priorities that we see as a team for companies winning in the experience economy. Clearly, we are moving away from just the delivery of services or products to competing in the experience economy. And that is pretty much the entire fabric of the entire work that Twimbit as a company is focusing on. Now, we see 6 distinct priorities for 2022. First and foremost, we have made that shift. Almost every company has made that shift to saying, we got to build a digital first mindset. And as you build a digital first mindset, there is a need to establish new measures of digital CX success. So we'll talk about what are these new measures and how do they supplement some of the existing measures that we have. Second, the delivery of great CX need us to organize our teams effectively. No longer can teams work in silos. So how are companies organizing themselves to deliver that? The third is you need the right technology architecture. And there are 3 foundational elements that we believe are most important, while we cover a few more in the session. The fourth one is companies, some of the cutting edge companies are really capitalizing on the big trends. They include trends like live commerce, and Asia clearly is a global leader in live commerce. We are also seeing the traditional brick and mortar companies fighting back to compete with the global e-commerce giants by integrating physical and digital experiences to deliver what we call as phygital experiences. And no delivery of CX is complete unless there is an emphasis on employees. The employee is emerged as an important stakeholder that needs to be taken care of as you strive to deliver outstanding CX. So we see some best practices there. And finally, what companies do realize is you can only deliver CX if you create the right partnerships. It's no longer about going and procuring a particular product from a particular vendor and then flipping on a switch to deliver CX. It requires you to develop a partnership ethos with a multitude of companies, some within your ecosystem, some outside your ecosystem, to complete that end-to-end journey for customers so that you can be a true life partner for your customer. So let's start with the first priority, which is the digital measure of success and why this is important, right? So we have seen companies now make digital first a priority. So that means, how do I deliver great digital experiences? Now, companies have traditionally measured customer experience by saying, how good is my CSAT score? How good is my NPS score? Now, these are good measures and we believe they should continue. But as experiences shift to digital, we believe that new measures of success that revolve around digital becomes important. Because now CX is no longer like a cost center. It's no longer just about delivering a service after a product is delivered. CX is a transformational business model innovation opportunity. And therefore, you need these new benchmarks. And we have spent considerable time working to establish this. One of the foundational piece of work that the Twimbit team did was with Temenos, a global leader in banking software. And by collaborating with them, we developed a 3-point framework for digital measures of success. We believe that in order to measure digital successfully, there are 3 distinct compartments or 3 distinct pillars. One is digital engagement value. How much is the engagement on your platform? So it's no longer about saying, average handling time and the lowest amount of average handling time, but it is about How closely am I engaged with the customer? Second is the digital efficiency value. That means how easy is it? How frictionless is that service, right? And third is ecosystem value. Now that's a profound growth opportunity that is available, because no longer are companies operating in individual silos of a particular product or service. As they look at expanding the outcome beyond their traditional offerings, the ecosystem value plays a very important part. And we'll discuss a few specific case studies of how some world-class companies from Asia have gone on to understand and establish digital ecosystem value. So specifically, let's look at these three pillars. Digital engagement value is how much time and how much interaction is happening on the platform. Can I improve the even interaction? Do people come back often enough and check my app 1 time a day, 10 times a day? Some of the e-commerce companies have gone even one step further. What are they doing? They are setting up live streaming inside their app so that the engagement and interaction can increase, because the more engagement, the more interaction, the more transactions, the more revenue. The second is the efficiency value. Now, efficiency value in a way is the opposite of friction score. That means how frictionless is the journey of the customer in engaging with you. Have we made it super efficient? What is the value, for example, of an onboarding efficiency, particularly, let's say, in the case of a bank? What is the value of the contextualization efficiency? When you understand, do you understand the context of the customer, and therefore you are able to relate and solve a customer problem more efficiently? And finally, the exciting part I talked about, which is the digital ecosystem value. So how do we look at the total value of the gross merchandise value of your particular ecosystem? What is your share of that ecosystem? How are you monetizing it, both by yourself and with partners? And I think that will get clearer as we look at some specific examples, right? So, by far, we know that DBS is one of the world leaders in digital banking. How are they measuring, or how are they becoming a better life partner to their customer? So, for example, DBS would have traditionally sold property loans or car loans, right? And you end up going to the bank at the fag end of the decision making. After you have found the house, you go to the bank and you say, can you get me? And by the time you're looking for the cheapest loan. So what DBS has done is reimagined that entire customer journey. They have integrated, they're partnered with one of the leading property websites, and you start your customer journey to look for a house, or to buy a car, or to plan a travel, or to do education on their website. And the good news is they delivered over $1 billion in loans through reimagining and creating that digital ecosystem for property purchase and consumption, right? Now, DBS has also innovated from the perspective of loans with by integrating with e-commerce, telecom, and other partners. In terms of DBS Payla, the transaction volume through partnerships, I think, has grown substantially. In the case of business accounting, they have partnered with accounting firms, etc., to enhance the overall customer value. So clearly a great example of digital engagement value and digital ecosystem value. Now, if you look at the case study of Grab, now Grab traditionally operated just in the mobility space, right? And how have they extended their value proposition? While Grab was a mobility company, they realized as the pandemic hit, they pivoted very quickly into the delivery space. So they were able to get into an adjacent ecosystem of deliveries now, which is far greater than the overall mobility gross merchandise volume. And even more importantly, they have now pivoted to financial services, and that's where they see the bulk of their growth is going to come in. So as a company, you need to start looking at how are you enabling that ecosystem? How are you building that ecosystem with partners? And I believe many companies will have to build their own ecosystem, but they also will participate in third-party ecosystems. So partnerships play a very important role as you look at growing. A final example, and I believe this is the world's best example of monetizing an ecosystem economy, is Ping An. And Ping An has built multiple ecosystem. Ping An started off as a traditional insurance company, and you can see now that they have pivoted because of the strength of their technology team and the technology foundation. They have rechristened themselves to be a world leading technology powered retail financial services group. They have so much information from their customers on their technology platforms that they have now created 5 distinct ecosystems. A financial services ecosystem, a healthcare ecosystem, an auto services ecosystem, a real estate, as well as a smart city ecosystem. Let's take an example of a specific ecosystem. Let's take the auto services ecosystem. So what are they doing there? While they are predominantly an insurance provider, they were not happy just selling the insurance, because by the time you buy the insurance, you're looking for the cheapest product, right? So they wanted to enhance the entire customer journey. So they take on the responsibility to make sure that you as a consumer have the best experience in owning that car, and any after sales service, support, accident, etc. associated with the car can be managed through the Ping An auto services ecosystem. So God forbid you get into an accident, Ping An's auto services ecosystem will firstly approve your insurance almost instantly. It will also recommend the nearest auto repair shop with ratings that you can go to get your car fixed. So they're transforming that entire experience, and through that process, they're increasing and becoming a life partner to their customer. So I believe increasingly in the experience economy, companies will pivot from the provision of products and services to orchestrating and the delivery of experiences. And building ecosystems will be a crucial foundational critical requirement for the very, very successful companies in the coming decade. So having looked at the measures of success, let's now go to the second pillar. So how do you organize yourself to deliver that success? Because it's too complicated. We have built companies over the last several decades, most companies, with very distinct organizational structures. You have a finance team, you have a customer service team, you have a product team, you have a HR team, you have legal teams. And we have built such strong teams. We have created so many silos. It's very difficult for people to collaborate effectively with each other to transform experiences. And that is the power of a startup. A startup today, collaborates on day one across different departments to reimagine that customer journey. So how do you as a company, if you are an established company, how do you go about organizing yourself for success, right? So who is responsible to drive CX success? Ideally, we think it should be the CEO, because the CEO should be passionate about it. He should discuss it all the time. He should present the CX metrics to his board, and he is ideally placed to make it happen. But not all CEOs are passionate about CX, so they may not necessarily be the best people to do it, and they should therefore find other people who can do it for them. Let's look at 3 specific examples of how 3 distinct companies have approached the organization structure for the delivery of CX. So you have, Woolworth is a fabulous case study from Australia. Woolworth is a retail supermarket. They have transformed themselves over the course of this pandemic. And you have the CEO, Brad Banducci, who himself leads CX from the front. And we have a fascinating case study. You should look it up on our platform about how Woolworth has transformed customer experience. The other example is that you can choose now. It can be a marketing head or a procurement head or a CTO or a chief digital officer or a head of sales who could take on the responsibility of owning CX. But in the case of, let's say, Microsoft, you have Gabriel Masili, who is the CTO of Microsoft, who is responsible for the end-to-end CX for the Windows, the Xbox, and the Surface. So we see, in many companies, either the CMO takes on that responsibility or the chief digital officer takes on that responsibility. And there are, in some companies, you have a specialized role created. as in the case of Volkswagen, where you have a chief customer experience officer who is now responsible to manage the end-to-end experience. And I must say, the success of this individual will greatly depend on the ability of the CEO to empower this individual and help him navigate the many silos in the respective organization. Now, beyond those people who are responsible for CX, you need to build a better organization structure for the governance and the implementation of many CX transformative projects. So here again, there are two distinct approaches. One approach is you have a CX head and he has a core CX team. So he has built a team with people from different skill sets, from data to digital to security to onboarding and call centers. And he or she and this particular team that we are talking about works together with the various departmental representatives from the various departments to execute all the CX projects and help deliver the outcome. This is how traditionally many companies have done it. It's slightly more challenging because the silos are still existing and the CX team needs to really bulldoze their way to make those outcomes possible. We see another way that many companies are beginning to approach, and I think TBS is a great example of this, where you set up cross-functional teams. So the CX head, be it the CTO or the CEO, identifies the many customer journeys that need to be transformed, and you create squads of people from various departments whose single-minded objective is to improve the overall customer journey, right? So they are responsible. They include people from business, from technology, from regulation, from finance, from legal, compliance, etc. They work together to enhance, and they are empowered to enhance that entire customer journey. So that's another way in which companies have done it. And it really, I think there's no one perfect answer. You got to choose what works for your company and the leadership team that you have. So essentially, 3 quick points to ensure successful CX governance. First and foremost, what do you want to achieve? Why is this CX important? Aligning it closely to the vision of the company and that experience, having that understanding of that experience that you want to deliver. Second is you got to create the cross-pollination of ideas. So while you can do top-down, you really need to empower teams so that you can have multidisciplinary teams work together. And the third one is have the clear KPIs to track the overall outcome that you want to get to, and it could be the digital measures of success that we talked about. So link this new model to the outcomes that you want to achieve. The next section we want to talk about is technologies in CX, and there is a large number of technologies that we have to work with to enable CX, and so there are maybe we have identified, or we have identified 5 specific technology trends that are shaping CX. The foundational pillar is really cloud. If you go back in 2021, 80% of all new sales in Asia Pacific were built on a cloud contact center. So we are now a cloud first. There are very few exceptions, and maybe because of regulations in industries like banking, etc., where companies have not used a cloud hosted contact center. What was considered so difficult to do in a matter of 18 months now, cloud first has become the new normal. Then you have automation. How can, because contrary to perception, the amount of engagement with companies have just increased. And to handle that volume, you need automation. We are seeing that conversational AI is now able to automate almost 80% of repeating inquiries. Now, the third one is we are seeing a large number of companies, almost the pioneers are beginning to say, we need a proper customer data platform so that we can capture data across all the touch points in a frictionless manner, so that we can actually enable a very personalized and anticipatory experience. So building the right customer data platform and building a proper customer data platform is the foundational pillar to do the ability to do analytics, etc. The other trend from a technology standpoint is the need to build a composable and predictable CX platform. So what do we mean by that? Traditionally, CX platforms or call centers were built as reaction. The client or the customer calls and you are there to provide support. We got to change it to anticipating what the customer needs are, solving the problem even before the customer realizes it is a problem. So you need a predictive CX platform. To be able to do that, I don't think any one single company can give you that end-to-end solution. The pace of innovation in the industry is so high that you need now an agile platform that brings together best of breed companies to build that predictive CX platform that is so required to architect that unique customer experience that you can give to your customer. The final one, which I think is not talked about by many analyst firms, is really about cybersecurity. We have seen a huge escalation in the number of frauds happening over the last 2 years or so. The greater amount of digital interaction means greater amount of cyber risk. So how do you use cybersecurity as a differentiator? Can you earn the trust of the customer? Because if you can give that assurance, I think you have a differentiation. And banks in particular have a huge opportunity to be that owner of trust. Because if they can own my trust, then I can do business in a much more peaceful, calm manner with them and entrust them with so much more of my investments and my life decisions, right? So these are the 5 big technology trends. Now, specifically, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about cloud because that has been one of the key drivers for growth in the industry. Almost every major contact center provider is now pivoted to delivering the cloud based infrastructure. There are 5 key drivers for cloud adoption. Traditionally, you had to buy the software. It would take you anywhere between a minimum of 6 months to a year to customize it for your needs. It was expensive, but today now you can skip all of those lengthy development cycles. You can implement it very quickly. You can remove all the silos. You had a particular infrastructure for calls. You had a separate infrastructure for messaging, and the website. It was all not connected. Man, now you can put it all together. The ability to remove silos was a key driver for, in this case, for Atomy to be able to track customer satisfaction and get a full 360-degree view of the customer. The other driver has been remote working, and maybe that was one of the key drivers as we pivoted during the pandemic to remote working. So the future of work is likely to be hybrid, and therefore, no matter what you do, you need a great solution that can enable hybrid working in a secure manner. And that has been a key driver, as is the case study, by Macmillan Shakespeare Group, right? The other big benefit of cloud is the ability to scale, right? So, and this is a huge benefit, especially to the new breed of startups and the soon-to-be unicorns or the big unicorns. You start small, and as your customer base grows, you can scale very, very quickly. You can scale quickly during peak times. So, for example, during COVID, many governments experienced high growth in volume. They didn't need the infrastructure for long periods of time, but they needed it for specific instances, specific durations. You can scale that infrastructure on demand as and when you need it. And that is a key strength of the cloud infrastructure solution. And finally, the ability to integrate a multitude of technologies, right? So as Singapore Airlines, I'm sure every call to every airline around the world has been pretty tough over the last 2 years. They are dealing with a large number of volumes of calls, people requesting to change tickets, plan their itinerary, and the ability to meet the customer expectation needs you to integrate new technologies like AI and machine learning, and that has been a key driver for Singapore Airlines to use the cloud-based infrastructure. The next point, other than cloud, was about conversational AI. So there was a lot of hesitation about use of conversational AI some time ago, but now it is one of the fastest growing segments. People have projected the market to be as high as about $18 billion in 2026. Virtual assistants are growing. We are having virtual assistants in many, many native languages. And I think this is now one of the top things that every CIO, CTO, or a chief customer experience officer is looking at integrating into their propositions. Now, companies like Alibaba take these bots, and they have they have been able to personalize the experience, giving specific recommendations for every individual based on your shopping, handling your return or refund more effectively. Can you believe the kind of automation rates they have achieved? They can handle 90% of customer tickets with about 87% resolution rate without human intervention. Incredible cost savings, and also most importantly, enhancing the experience for the consumer. Uniqlo has done something more remarkable, which is giving customer styling tips using conversational AI. Users can or customers can now identify pieces in magazines, and you can interact with them, and you can provide style, and you get very stylized inspiration based on even hourly product rankings, and that has been a huge hit. And so this is just the beginning. So it goes beyond just customer support to transforming experiences, delivering personalization at scale. One of the other fascinating trends we wanted to cover in the state of CX is live commerce. And live commerce was, clearly Asia and China in particular is the global leader for live commerce. It was pioneered by Taobao Live in 2016, and since then, live commerce has seen unprecedented growth. We have strong reason to believe that live commerce will see significant more application in mainstream, be it in future banking apps or e-commerce apps or education apps. The tighter integration will help improve engagement rates. Now, what is the value creation for live commerce, right? Value creation happened because, one, there is increased engagement and interaction. You can get real-time feedback from the customer who is on the platform, by the way he or she is liking it, giving you feedback in the form of chat. You can actually drive greater inclusivity. So you have now very powerful influencers who are able to reach out to a broader cross-section of market, and that drives greater inclusivity and engagement on the platform. Companies are using it to differentiate. Live streaming can be done from anywhere. There is no geographical limitation, and it is also, it also drives instant gratification with customers. China is by far the global leader. What started off as less than $71 billion in 2019 has grown sixfold in just 3 years, right? And the categories are usually fashion, apparel, consumer electronics, etc. So China will continue to lead it. It is the 6 tech titans of China who are leading the way in terms of driving live commerce. Again, we have a very detailed report on our platform. We encourage you to read it. There are some specific trends, the rise of the super host, which is the key opinion leaders. These key opinion leaders are able to manage now millions of customers or millions of followers and use that to influence buying decision. Live streaming, where people do live streaming, see now, buy now, and it extends beyond small and medium businesses to fashion and beauty. You know what? The next set of innovation is that super hosts can also be AI driven. So you don't even need a real human to be a super host. And what these brands do is they run live shows, almost like running a fashion show, so that they can limit the purchase of counterfeit. Some companies have even used it to cater to, now during the pandemic, people from Korea and Japan could not travel to, let's say, China. So you could use use live streaming to actually cater to demand from other geographies. One of the most influential influencers is the Lipstick King. He's so popular, and he sold almost $1.8 billion of goods or merchandise in a 12.5-hour live stream on Singles Day. Incredible. He had 250 million viewers. possibly 50% of all women in China tuned into the lipstick king, right? Now he's authentic, he's seen as being reliable. He earns somewhere like 10 to 20 million US dollars a month, right? So clearly influencers have a huge role to play. Now, it is not just those influencers. We have seen they have even used live streaming to democratize the ability for farmers to reach out to customers in cities. So now you had 110,000 farmers reached out to urban customers, showing them the products, engaging with customers, and through that process, cultivating a better connection with the end customer. And they sold over, $786 million of agricultural sales in last year. So clearly, live streaming is beginning to have incredible applications, not just in e-commerce, but even beyond e-commerce. And we'll see more of those in the near future. The other trend we want to talk about is what we call as phygital, right? The digital companies, the digital native companies, particularly the e-commerce companies, they succeeded immensely in the era of COVID, simply because being digital first gave them that chance. But what we have now seen is the brick and mortar companies are catching up. They are putting significant amount of resources in digital technologies to compete effectively. Now, we all are familiar, most of us in Southeast Asia are very familiar with Isetan Mitsukoshi, Isetan as a store, right? And Isetan Mitsukoshi in Japan, what they have done is they have integrated physical with the digital. Firstly, they started with a remote shopping app, so there are about 15,000 items. And what you can do is you can do a live chat, you can do a video call with the shopping assistant, they can consult you, and it's almost the benefit of being in the store without actually being in the store. They had a target of about 219 million. They exceeded the target to 276 million in FY 2020. We are eagerly awaiting their annual report this year to see how much more growth have they achieved. Now, they also did a virtual shopping app, so you could simulate yourself. You create a virtual avatar of yourself, and you can go through the store. You can have a realistic view of the items on display by using some VR features. And they even kind of came up with exciting partnerships like the Tokyo National Museum and Disney Ultimate Princess Celebration Space to enhance that overall virtual experience. So clearly, companies are the brick and mortar companies are leveraging on their biggest strength, which is the ability to engage in physical stores. Uniqlo is another fascinating example. Uniqlo had a fabulous app called Style Hint, which was for style recommendations or outfit recommendations. Now, in their physical store, which is the Harajuku store, which is the hotspot of pop culture, what Uniqlo did was they displayed over 240 touchscreens. So if you are in that store physically, you can scan through it, you can select, you can see where the location of that particular item is, thereby enhancing the entire experience of buying in the physical store. We finally move on to looking at CX in banks, because banks, by far invest the most in technology. On an average, the cutting edge banks like DBS or JP Morgan, they spend about 10% of their total revenues in technology. So it makes sense to study what they're doing. And most of the banks, I would say, have led in digital transformation. They're great role models in transforming themselves to compete with it. Now, it has been a fascinating year for the banks. Opening a bank account remotely was impossible. You couldn't even think about it. Now, if you go through a typical opening process, sometimes it takes 30 minutes, 40 minutes online. But a lot of banks have now placed tremendous emphasis on that digital efficiency value we talked about. So now, for example, in India, where regulation is still pretty tight, you can now open a bank account in about less than 10 clicks. So that's tremendous improvement. In some other countries, like Singapore, you have an ability that you have a government ID, which could also make it possible for you to open a bank account very simply. Now, banks have also invested a lot in gamified budgetary tools powered by AI and big data to transform experiences. They are extending their propositions to becoming super apps so that you don't have to leave the banking app for maybe all your needs, be it payments, be it shopping, etc. Investing heavily in security so that onboarding and frictionless transactions is possible. And more importantly, like we saw in the case of Uniqlo as well as Isetan, they are integrating technology into the physical stores and transforming it. DBS, for example, has a cafe and a branch concept. You are greeted with a robot. You walk in and you enjoy a cup of coffee, and then you have a chat with the banking advisor. ICICI Bank, I told you earlier, in India, now you can open a bank account in less than 7 clicks. NAB increased their virtual chats. 85% automation rate. Only 15% of chats were transferred to the contact center. And HDFC has now integrated video KYC. So lots of cool innovation happening. Integration of gaming. UOB's app tomorrow is a fun app, very gamified, addressing the youth and the youth and the Gen Z. They have integrated a game inside the app, enables you to manage your finances. UpBank also does something similar. You can work together with and a kind of a two-player banking app, and a fabulous innovation. And then you have the likes of Revolut, which have integrated with other apps to help automate everyday tasks. And Paytm is an example of a super app in India. Started off as a payment app, but now you can do everything from shopping to payment, all in that one app. So fabulous examples of innovation coming from the banks. The next section is on the top employee experience trends, because over the last 18 months, again, we have seen that every company realizes investing in employee experience is an absolute critical need, because employees are the one who talk to the customer, and therefore employees as important a stakeholder as the customer. So the amount of innovation that we have done in transforming customer journeys end to end, the best in class companies are investing the same amount of money to transform employee journeys right from onboarding till the moment they leave the company. So we look at a few specific examples, 6 examples of companies, how they are shaping employee experience. You have the likes of Probe, which is one of the largest BPOs from Australia, transforming end-to-end employee experience, providing them with the right tools from day one. So they've reviewed the entire employee journey, and right from onboarding to learning to the gamification and transforming that entire experience. Bayer, on the other hand, is looking at giving people the ability to make individual choices, working towards the shared vision of the company. So they have put together, for example, what they call as the vSolve platform, aligning the entire workforce to work together to innovate, so that we can give the employee the choice, and what he or she wants to innovate, align his or her vision with the shared company vision. At Twimbit, we ourselves are trying hard to implement what we call as the quadruple bottom line of L&D. That means it's a 4-pronged L&D model that we want to adopt. It encompasses mapping the internal learning with the core skills encompassing people, purpose, planet, and prosperity. Right. So it's the quadruple bottom line of L&D that we are aspiring to build. Then you have innovation as a culture. So High Alpha Innovation is an idea management platform where it's an open innovation, encourages employees at all levels to contribute and comment on ideas and help unlock innovation. You have the example of Corda, which is looking at enabling employees to adapt that self-awareness regarding their learning, their current situation. And what it does is it enables every employee to discover their strengths or weaknesses, and then take through a 12-month training for all senior executives across the 12 facilities they have globally. right? And finally, the example of OCBC Bank, which has got a future smart program to develop a future ready workforce. So what it is doing is it's helping integrate a habit of continuous learning, moving beyond the achievement of just short-term learning goals to say, hey, how do I drive sustainable growth? How do I have, how do I equip my teams with technological skills of the future so that they can keep themselves abreast of the changing needs of the organization. We take a closer look at CX solution providers. Many companies, it's been an exciting year for them. I've been tracking this space for a good over 25 years. And I must say, this has been one of the best years for CX solution providers. One, overall spending has increased from all quarters. Some companies are seeing some exceptional growth. SaaS revenues, we have moved away from selling licenses to SaaS, and SaaS revenues are now the dominant revenue stream, even for the traditional companies, right? It's been a big year of fundraising for many companies, and many vendors have extended their offerings through acquisitions, right? So you have now, a large number of companies, Twilio has exceeded its revenue forecast and, has had a spectacular year. Companies are growing anywhere between 3% to over 56%. Obviously, if you're a bigger company, the growth rate is slightly smaller. It's been also a great year for fundraising. Talkdesk raised over 230 million. Freshworks went IPO, listed in NASDAQ, raised over $1 billion. Genesys, one of the giants of the traditional contact center, has made a pivot to becoming now a SaaS company. They raised over $580 million in funding led by Salesforce Ventures. A large number of other companies, from Bluecore to Unifor. Unifor, again, a startup initially originated from India, now has raised over 140 million, in Series D funding. Again, raising total of $210 million. So a fascinating time for startups. Many of these vendors are now extending their offerings through acquisition. They're acquiring companies with capabilities, particularly in the area of AI, automation, speech. Microsoft's acquisition of Nuance, $19.7 billion, goes on to say how important conversational AI will be, moving forward. The other point is, as we said, SaaS revenues are now the dominant revenue for most companies. So for Genesys, combined growth of 125% for the first half of 2022. NICE saw its cloud revenues now 52% of total revenue, and almost similar numbers coming from Variant and Avaya as well. The BPOs, there was a time maybe 4 or 5 years ago, people thought, hey, what will happen to the BPOs as all engagement moves to digital? Will we need these BPOs? Contact center companies will go out of business, is what people thought. But what has happened instead is, we have seen incredible growth in the overall engagements happening, and therefore BPOs have enjoyed even more growth with newer value propositions around digital engagement, and they themselves transforming themselves to meet with the newer needs of customers. So they have seen strong revenue growth. They have acquired companies to enhance their capabilities. They have extended their geographic presence, and they have also, many of them have, also seen IPOs in this particular year. TaskUs went IPO as well. They have seen some good growth. What is even commendable is a company like Teleperformance, over $7 billion in revenue, yet growing at 20% annually. So you can see that the customer experience industry is now innovating, growing, attracting some of the best talent in the world. And they're also doing it through acquisitions and partnerships to strengthen their overall portfolio. So every single company, right from Concentrix to Teleperformance, has acquired newer capabilities to serve their customers. And we talked about the IPOs. An Asian company, TDCX, raised over $348 million by going IPO in NASDAQ. Companies like Teleperformance and TaskUs have expanded into newer regions to achieve better growth. So that was a whirlwind tour of the entire state of CX. We hope you found it interesting. Do share with us your feedback. We will dwell into each of these in more detail as we go through this year. We look forward to collaborating with many of you as we look at enhancing and enabling companies and executives around the world deliver extraordinary customer experiences. Thank you very much for your time.